Everybody, welcome back to the Overrun on YouTube. Ed Bowder here with Josh Hartman. He is an EMS tour chief, thought leader, educator, jack of all trades, and he's also from New Jersey. Josh, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation, and I look forward to our conversation.
I'm excited to talk to you. So we brought you on today because we wanted to talk about leadership in EMS. It's something that, we have classes through NAEMT, like people, where we're talking about ethical leadership. We have, management and, tour chiefs, certainly, and upper level management that talks about leadership. But I guess we have a concern that there's the kind of the concept of leadership, and sometimes it tends to degrade into simple management. So before we get too far into the weeds, from your experience, I wanted to have kind of what your take on the difference between leadership and management actually is.
Absolutely. This is a very interesting topic in business in general, but more and more interesting when you break it down into EMS, right? Because EMS in general, people think of, okay, if we're lucky, they think we treat patients, we do amazing things, we take them to the hospital. If we're unlucky, then we're just ambulance drivers. And in none of that conversation Are we actually employees. We're not volunteers. We're just kind of pick them up and put them down. So I think there has been over the years a gap in what we do and how that really translates into a job with responsibilities that go beyond getting in and out of an ambulance and on and off stretchers for our patients. So I think what you're bringing up is important because oftentimes the leadership was only management. And management to me is someone who is directing from above. They are saying, here is your policy manual. You are going to abide by this policy manual. You are going to be here at 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. for your 12-hour shift. And if you do everything great, then you're going to go home and we'll see you again tomorrow morning. That's management, right? And they're making sure that the ambulances or your fly cars or whatever are on the road.
Right. Shifts are filled.
Exactly, right? People who bang out, we have to cover shifts, right? So that's management. That's not leadership. Leadership is when someone does the things that they would want you to do, sets examples. Yes, there is a policy component to being a leader, but a leader is also a mentor. A manager is not necessarily a mentor. A leader is someone who not only says, okay, we have to fill bang outs, we have to fill shifts that are empty, but if no one shows up, I'm going to go on the truck because it's important that our patients in our community get care, despite the fact that this person didn't show up for whatever reason. So leadership is a much more engaged position than a manager.
So if I'm working in an organization and I fancy myself as a leader, or I've taken a class, or it's been told to me that my position is leadership here, talk to me a little bit about culture shifts. Certainly it's not an easy task, but I worry that when people are brought into positions in organizations that may have had issues before the new administration came in, or organizations that have a lot of turnover, how do I guess, resist the temptation as someone who's in management to defer to management and not leadership, I guess, is the first question. And then if I'm involved in a system that needs leadership and that opportunity falls on me, how do I go about, I guess, trying to change the culture in my organization?
Another great question, even more so in EMS than in many areas. And that's because we have a very difficult time transitioning our line paramedics to become leaders. We suffer from that because we don't really have anything in between. You're either a paramedic showing up for your shift, or you're transitioning, or you've been moved into a leadership role. So to answer your first question, I think that in that capacity, what we need to do is we need to identify people, not just because they have seniority, but because they have the skill set, the interest, and the drive to do something when they're finished with their line medic career. It isn't that you're a 20-year medic, 16-year medic, 12-year medic, whatever you are, or EMT for that matter. It's not ALS or BLS related. That okay, now you're going to be a leader. You're going to be a manager because you have X number of years of seniority. That is a recipe for disaster. Absolute recipe for disaster. So first things first, you have to choose your leaders wisely. And once you do that, you then at least have an interested party who then will become a leader and will be interested in taking leadership initiative, taking leadership classes. So, step one, choose wisely. Don't choose just because of seniority. Step two, your expectations of a newly minted leader have to come from above. You can't just bring a leader on and say, okay, now you're a tour chief, right?
Go get
Now
them.
you're the clinical coordinator. Good luck. So it is super important that you have the wherewithal to put these people who are willing through a leadership type academy, engage them with other people who are going through the same thing that they are, and leaders who have taught people who have gone through that. It's generally an external phenomenon. It's generally not an internal phenomenon.
And you spend a lot of time talking about hiring the right people for the right positions. And I think that's important because I think not just with EMS management, but I think in management specifically, there's a lot of people that tend to kind of lean into the sunk cost fallacy where, we've hired this person, we've already spent X amount of dollars either training them or paying them or, their benefits, whichever you want to look at. And certainly this doesn't necessarily go to the organizational level because I know that there's not senior vice presidents listening to the show and suddenly having an awakening moment. We're like, oh, no, you're right. Maybe we should do that. And of course, no one ever wants to fire themselves.
Yeah.
Right. So and I've had these conversations with staff, and I feel like it's a very frustrating conversation for staff members to have of this person's been put in this position. It's not working for whatever reason. Talk to me a little bit about organizational structures and how at that level those conversations kind of work, where it's, we've hired Josh and, he did a great job as a staff medic, and now he's give him whatever position you want, operations coordinator. And, he was better as a staff medic, but we've spent all this money putting Josh in this position. What do we do with him? How do we give some ideas on that? And I guess, how do we avoid that as a culture, as a workplace?
So I think we need to think of ourselves as a business. We can't think of ourselves as just EMS. We have to think of ourselves as a business. And as a business, when you bring someone onto a position, you set expectations, right? You reestablish expectations. The expectations of me, Josh, as a manager and leader, is no longer the same expectations as it was when I was a paramedic. And that needs to start at the job description, and then it needs to start at the hiring process, and then it needs to continue with the expectations that are set for me immediately upon my hiring, my 30, 60, 90 day review. But doesn't this sound like any job? Doesn't this sound like a regular job in corporate America?
It does. And that's one of the things is I think we tend to we want to silo EMS so desperately, and 60% of EMS is run by a fire department in the United States. So, and there's, if you've seen one shop, you've seen one shop. Everywhere has their own concerns. Certainly in our state, almost every, the big EMS projects are hospital based. So now you're dealing with budgets of billions of dollars that are certainly very difficult to deal with. And, it's a Herculean effort to try and say like, well, my hospital system has $10 billion or whatever figure, and we're asking for 100,000, right? And I feel like a lot of those sums feel like a lot of money, right? Where, the cost of hiring and training an employee over a year might cost $1 million. It costs generally $2 million in most businesses to retrain somebody if you've lost them. So I can understand why you want to reduce attrition, right? And so if you put someone in that position, it costs all that money to keep them. So I understand the resistance, I guess, to switching around your administration and your staff. Have we put ourselves in a situation where in EMS, we're so comfortable with these types of management structures and arguably these types of leadership failures that I guess we're so used to those types of situations that culturally we've just kind of stopped expecting better. Is that kind of right, or am I just way off base with that?
You're not off base entirely. I would say that we are a very tight knit community.
Yeah.
Very tight knit.
We are that. Everybody knows everybody.
Everybody knows everybody. I can tell you, I probably know not 100%, but a very high percentage of the paramedics in the state of New Jersey I'm sure I know them. If not, if I don't know them, they're one phone call away. I'm
Yeah.
one removed. I'm not
Right.
second two. Two people removed from anybody probably. And so if you just think about that, and you think about the environment in which we work, yes, we've gotten too. Not sure the word is comfortable, but we've gotten too internally fixated that we want to do everything we can for our niche small community to make them the best that they can be, which is great, except that at times that is a limiting factor. And
Right.
so I think that we are a little bit protective. I don't think we're comfortable. I think we're protective. We're protective of our group. And I think you could say the same thing in the fire department. And I'm not even talking about unionization. That's a whole
Hmm.
nother, conversation about human resources and how people move up. And I'm putting unions completely aside for the moment. I'm
No,
just
that's a
talking.
whole separate conversation.
We can have a whole different podcast,
Yeah,
webinar, whatever you want.
we don't
On
have 4 hours to go
Yeah,
over today.
exactly on labor relations and negotiations, right? So, but if we skip that for a minute and we go back to just talking about our community, we want to see the people within our community be successful, and that's a great thing. But not everybody is going to fit every mold, and so it is important that we recognize that yes, we should try and promote within. I'm a huge proponent of that. But we have to do it in the right way with the right people and not fool ourselves into being like,
Right.
oh, well, we're going to move Joe Smith up because you know what? He's been here a long time, shown dedication to the hospital or to the unit or to wherever. He's going to be the manager. We can't think that way. We have to think like a business because ultimately, at the end of the day, as as amazing as people we are about helping people, this is this. It's a business, and you got to retain that
Right.
business. And the only way to do that is to have an effective operation, and that requires good leadership.
And we had Lou Imperatrice on a couple months ago, and he kind of had the same idea. What my thing is, speaking as someone with an MBA, it's upsetting to me that healthcare has to be a business, and that's just my own personal views. But there is a reality that healthcare is a business. I tend to think EMS should be a service. I don't think it should be profit driven, but again, it's the world that we're living in, and it's very difficult to avoid that reality that there has to be a profit made in most places. And even if you're a nonprofit organization, you still have to generate revenue. And there's certainly problems with Medicare reimbursement and all that kind of ties to it. But I do think that's been one of the biggest issues is that we decided at some point, this is a more like fraternal structure than a business structure, which, and at volunteer agencies, I have no problem with that. We should be all about brotherhood and fraternity, and it should be a close-knit group. But administrating a system in that same way, I don't think works particularly well. So in 2017, a couple friends of the show, Rem Leclerc was the principal author on this paper. They talked about looking at different leadership ideas, and Dave Page was the consulting physician or consulting author on this paper. So they went through defining components of team leadership and membership in pre-hospital emergency medical services, and they came up with this list of different ideas that would make an effective leader. And I want to talk to you about some of these things.
Sure.
One of them here. So the first one is creates an action plan that's on here. And this is talking more about the organization, not so much about the individual. Certainly when people are put on IAPs, individual action plans, it's kind of a step toward termination. And I think that worries a lot of people. So this is talking about something different. This is you get a leader into a position, they create a plan to try and grow the organization. And I don't know. Again, I'm not convinced that someone who's brought into an organization necessarily has that. I think in interviews, you're asked questions, what would you do, in this situation? But it tends to be more, what would you do if an employee, did something that was negative or misrepresented the organization? How would you react? So I want your reaction on some of these things. Creating an action plan, communication, I think is a big thing. And then I want to just kind of go through, demonstrating confidence and compassion is important, but I think confidence is often confused for more like a machoism kind of thing. So in some of these lists here, talk to me about some of the things that the qualities you look for in a good leader and some of the downfalls that come from that. Specifically, I want to talk about the action plan thing, and I want to talk about confidence being confused for, more brusqueness.
Sure. So first off, Remley, Dr. Crow, amazing. Love working with her in my other areas, and Dave Page and I work together. So I've seen this paper, I'm aware of it. And then to answer your question, so creates an action plan. I think that their goal there is that if you're going to take a role, you have to develop what you expect to achieve in that role. So it isn't necessarily, like you're talking about a performance improvement plan. That's not what they're talking about, right? They're talking
Right.
about, I get hired as a leader at hospital X, at fire department Y. What am I going to do? How am I going to put together a plan that is going to demonstrate whatever my goals are, that is going to move my agency further down the road? So, for example, let's say I get employed by an agency, and we operate BLS units, but my goal is I want to add ALS units, right? Or I have two 24-hour trucks and I want to add another one, or I want to add an SCTU, a critical care, right? That's an action plan. An action plan is, where does this unit look? What does this unit look like? This agency look like in a year, 2, 3, 4 years, and how do I get from where I am today to that point and measure myself along the way? That's what I think Remley and Dave are talking about when they're talking about creating an action plan. When you talk about demonstrating confidence, compassion, maturity, these are buzzwords in leadership at all, in general. I think when you are a leader, you have to demonstrate confidence, not cockiness, but you have to demonstrate confidence because you are a decision maker, and decision
Right.
makers require confidence. The other pieces here, when it comes to compassion, maturity, command presence, trustworthiness, these are things that you want to parlay and model for the rest of your staff. You want them to recognize compassion, to recognize maturity. They too will need to demand presence in their component of their business, of their roles, and then trustworthiness. These are things that you would expect a leader to model towards their employees, towards their staff, and expect and hold them to that. But I think that the goal here really is to demonstrate proficiency and have in your head where you think this agency needs to be at a certain fixed point in time, and how you're going to show people and then actually execute getting there.
And that's something that we talked about, making EMS act like a business. This is a business plan.
Yeah.
Is what this is. This is, if you're trying to run a system, you put together a business plan for this. So I like the statement that an action plan is, we're here in 18 months, we want to be there. So we're going to do these 5 or 6 very specific things. And one of the things that I benefited from Professor Larry Chait was talking about the concept of alignment, which is kind of the same idea, which is, we want to be the best EMS organization in the state, the region, whatever. And the idea is that it's a goal you'll never hit, right? Where, we want to be the best, so everything we do has to be in alignment toward being the best organization. So how do we do that, right? And I think the idea is that it's sort of unachievable, so you keep building toward that kind of idea. Right. Matthew McConaughey had a whole Oscars acceptance speech talking about my favorite person to talk to is me in 5 years. So I think that's very important, where it's, if we have one failing that doesn't contribute to that, that alignment, that action plan, it's fine as long as we kind of get back on track toward it.
Oh yeah,
And
100%. I want to convince you and your reader and your listeners that saying that EMS is operating as a business shouldn't be interpreted as a negative. I want to
yeah,
convince them that I want to convince you and convince them that operating at a business leads to a successful operation. It doesn't
mm-hmm.
need to make $1 million if that's not your goal. If your goal as a
Right.
non-for-profit is to, eke out 5-10% that you can put in for the next year, then that's a perfectly acceptable goal and a perfectly acceptable business solution. But I think
Right.
we need to think of it as a business in addition to a service, because like any business, if you identify key performance indicators, KPIs, that's what's going to get you, 12, 18. This is coming from another MBA, one MBA to another, right?
Yep.
It's going to set you up and your organization, your agency up for success if you identify what those key performance indicators are, and then you along the way you strike those. It also makes sure that you don't have what you just said before, is that tomorrow's the day that never comes, right? That you're not setting yourself up for expectations that are unrealistic. You're setting yourself up to reach goal A in 10 months, goal B in 16 months, et cetera, et cetera. So the business part, I just think, is a way to think about it. It's a methodology of how to have a
Yeah.
successful organization. It's not, I don't want to think it as a negative connotation that it's a business versus a service. When you're in front of a patient, you're focused on your patient. Your Hippocratic oath and everything else that goes along with it, right? You're focused on your
Right.
patient. But as a leader, you have to have that component, but you also have to have the sustainability and the resilience component of your actual business operations.
No, I think that's right. And I think good leadership and good management acts to facilitate the field staff where, we want all this clinical excellence, but we also have to set you up into a place where you'll have that clinical excellence. So just two more quick things here. I want to talk about taking charge and accountability where, because I feel like when I see those things, it's easy to see take charge, accountability. It's me holding the staff accountable for the things they do. Talk to me about reciprocal accountability between the staff and the leadership and what that looks like. And then we'll talk about that and we'll get out of here.
Oh yeah, no problem. So takes charge. So I think this goes back. Takes charge to me is the same or similar to what we spoke about before. Is that you have a responsibility, fiduciary or otherwise, to the agency or organization. So at times it is going to be It is going to be your responsibility as the leader to be the leader, to demonstrate that you can take responsibility, take onus and responsibility on a particular issue. You could think of it almost kind of like in our EMS head terms as this is the incident commander, right? This is
There you go.
the
Yeah.
incident commander. That person is taking charge. The white helmet says go left, you go left. The white helmet says go right, you go right. There is no question about it because when you're dealing with a situation in which, and this is not your daily operation, right? This is kind of when you're at a decision point and you need to go left or
Yeah.
right. You need someone that's going to guide that ship, right? And so that's what, in my opinion, what Remley and Dave are talking about, taking charge. This is now your ship. You need to set sail in a particular direction, and you need to get buy-in from your stakeholders, in this case, your employees, or maybe it's even upward stakeholders to achieve whatever objective that is. Accountability goes both ways, and I think that's what you're alluding to. When I first started in my professional career at one of the big six consulting firms, they had this whole 360 evaluations every year, right? Where I
Yep.
am evaluated by one of the partners, and then I have to evaluate the senior managers and partners. And I thought it was a great idea. I'm not sure it actually was ever really successful, but as a consulting firm, that's what they tell everyone else to do. So of course we had to do it as well. But
Right.
there's something to it, and it requires the right leader to be able to accept either most of the time it's anonymous critique. And
Mhm.
I think that is one of the key success factors to being a good leader, whether you're an EMS or not, is that can you take a critique, a constructive criticism, and turn it into a positive. No one likes to hear, that they are not doing a good job. No one likes to hear that
Yeah.
that nobody likes them and that their approval rating by their staff is 25%. No one wants to hear that, right? But can you internalize that and say, okay, there's probably some noise there in any service or business. There's some noise there that you upset someone because you didn't give them the day off they wanted or whatever. But
Yeah.
put that noise, handicap that noise, put that noise aside. But there's probably some legitimacy to what the feedback that you're getting. So how do you as a leader internalize that and then seek support to become a better leader? Right? Take what they're saying seriously if it's warranted, and many times it is. And again, sometimes that takes an external sounding board, a coach, someone to help you see the forest through the trees on what people are trying to get at. So I would say in EMS, it's difficult. We need to get better at it. We do not usually do upward evaluations. We don't really have a very hierarchical system. Well, we have a hierarchical system. It's just not very high, right? You have your line medic, then maybe you have a tour
Yep.
chief, and then you have a boss or maybe a clinical person in between. But at the end of the day, we're just doing our shifts and as a line medic, and we don't really have that much interaction with them until it comes time to be evaluated or we do something wrong, or hopefully when we do something right. Right?
Yep.
It's kind of going back to when I do QA, right? I do QA. I don't just send flags when people do something wrong. I send flags when they treated a critical patient really well, so that when people see on their email that, oh, they got a flag from Josh, they're not immediately like, oh,
Oh no, what did I do wrong this time?
what did I do wrong? Because
Yeah.
it's they know they've already received a flag from me in the past. Like, wow, this was a very tough case. You did a great job. you treat it appropriately, expeditiously, you manage the situation, right? So that's part of it as well. So I think that we need to give them an opportunity to give us feedback, and you just got to figure out what the best way to do that is in your particular organization. But there's a way.
No, I think that's right. And certainly organizations like the Center for Creative Leadership have really good insights on, how to do just that, how to creatively lead. If you have a restricted budget or if you have a budget that you weren't anticipating, how do you creatively build your organizations through that? And they have a bunch of resources that are available for anyone that goes onto the website, and the website will be listed in the show notes. So, Josh Hartman, thank you so much for your time. If you have one final thought to someone who's watching this, they want to be a better leader in EMS, what is your word to them?
My word is take the job that you want, not the job that is given to you. You can't. It may not be the right one for you. Wait for the right one for you. It's too often that we take the next job because we want to get off the street. We want to move up. I get it. Make sure it's the right job for you.
And I think that's right. Josh Hartman, he is the ruler of all he oversees in all of his different job titles. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time. Guys, make sure to like and subscribe to get this information out to everybody for the YouTube algorithm and for the Overrun. I'm Ed Bowder, and we'll talk next time.